Hey guys, tonight we're diving, literally, into a place where history doesn't just whisper, it gurgles. Picture this, you're 60 feet below the Aegean Sea in 1923, your lungs burning as you cling to a weighted stone to sink faster. The only light comes from the oil-filled glass helmet bolted to your shoulders, and your job is to harvest sponges until your fingers prune into raisins. But then your knife snags on something that isn't squishy. You wipe away centuries of silt and find yourself staring at a marble column carved with octopuses dancing in a spiral. Your first thought? Ugh, this'll take forever to haul up, and sponges pay better. So you kick off the seabed and leave it there. For 37 years. Let's get real, you wouldn't last 5 minutes as a 1920s sponge diver. The pay was terrible, the work was lethal, shout out to the 1 in 3 mortality rate, and worst of all? You'd have ignored one of archaeology's greatest finds because your boss was yelling about quotas. Meet Nikos Kalamatas, the actual diver who discovered the first clue to the underwater city and promptly forgot about it until he drunkenly mentioned some fancy rock at a taverna in 1961. Historians still argue whether Nikos was a pragmatic hero or just really bad at multitasking. But let's linger in that moment, shall we? The water's so cold it feels like needles pricking your neck seal. Your woolen diving suit, yes, wool, has absorbed enough seawater to double your body weight. Every sponge you stuff into your net could buy a loaf of bread, but that column, it's too smooth, too deliberate. You run a thumb over the carving and accidentally dislodge a sea urchin that's been nesting there since the Ottoman Empire. The urchin drifts away, probably annoyed, as you make the pragmatic choice. Leave history to the historians and grab another sponge. Here's a fun fact to distract you from the hypothermia. Sponge diving was the Mediterranean's answer to the gold rush. Men risked paralysis from decompression sickness, known then as the bends of shame, because dried sponges were the duct tape of the ancient world, used for everything from washing dishes to makeshift medieval tampons. But the real kicker? That marble column Nikos found wasn't even the weirdest thing down there. Scrolls later revealed the city's architects had written actual complaints about sea cucumbers clogging their sacred drainage pipes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Seriously, if you're only here to hate listen, maybe just let the algorithm bless someone else tonight. For everyone else, drop a comment with your location and local time. Let's see who's drifting off in Sydney versus Stockholm. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not just hearing about this city, you're floating through its drowned streets. That tingle on your skin? That's not your blanket. That's the ghost of Nikos' rusty diving knife brushing past, still salty from regret. Up ahead, the market square's fish stalls now house bioluminescent eels, and the temple steps are crusted with barnacles sharp enough to slice through time itself. But we'll get to the eels later. For now, let's settle into the rhythm of Nikos' fins pushing through the gloom, the creak of his air hose twisting like a tired serpent, and the distant clang of a ship's bell far above, counting down the seconds until someone else notices the column. You're floating past Nikos' forgotten column now, its octopus carvings swaying in the current like they're still alive. Ahead lies the city proper, a labyrinth of algae-coated rooftops sloping downward, as if the architects took one look at Mount Olympus and said, nah, let's dig a basement instead. While every other Bronze Age culture was hoisting citadels onto hilltops like paranoid squirrels with acorns, these folks went full reverse. Their grand innovation? Building into the seafloor like human mollusks. Let's unpack that. You know how your real estate agent keeps yammering about location, location, location? These people chose a spot where the nearest grocery run required holding your breath for 2 minutes. Mainstream history will tell you hilltop cities were about defense, high ground, sightlines, the usual. But here's the twist, underwater had its perks. Enemy ships couldn't bombard what they couldn't see through 40 feet of shimmering blue. Plus, refrigeration was free. Just stash your olives in a crevice and let the Mediterranean chill do the rest. You're gliding over what used to be the city planner's office now, its walls crusted with limpets. Inside, some clerk probably spent his days arguing, "But sir, if we build below sea level, the property taxes will be," before getting cut off by a mayor obsessed with avant-garde urban design. The real kicker? They used seaweed as mortar. Not the dried, Pinterest craft kind, fresh, slimy strands that acted like underwater glue as they decomposed. It's the Bronze Age equivalent of building IKEA furniture with bubblegum, and yet, it held. For centuries. Historians still argue whether this was a stroke of genius or collective madness. One faction claims the city's founders were inspired by coral reefs, nature's apartment complexes. Another insists they were just really bad at estimating sea level rise. But the quirkiest theory? A recently deciphered clay tablet suggests the whole project started because the king's toddler kept crying, "I want to live with the fishies," and the royal architect panicked. Let's get tactile for a second. Reach out and brush your fingers against a surviving section of wall. Feel those ridges? Each undulation was designed to break up currents, turning the ocean's rage into a gentle swirl around bedrooms and bakeries. You can almost hear the original sales pitch, forget moats. Why not have an entire ocean as your security system? HOA fees include complimentary plankton. Here's a reality check. Modern divers need $10,000 gear to spend an hour down here. These guys worked 8-hour shifts in nothing but linen loincloths and sheer audacity. Their secret? A snorkel made from hollowed-out bulrushes and pig bladders, the ancient version of a protein shake. Breathe too fast, though, and you'd suck a startled shrimp straight into your lungs. Notice the doorways ahead? They're round, like portholes, because square corners created turbulent eddies that'd slam doors shut. This also meant everyone moved through life in a perpetual crouch, which explains the skeletal remains showing remarkably toned thigh muscles. Fitness culture, Bronze Age style. As you drift deeper, the light dims to an eerie twilight. That's not just depth. The architects layered translucent seashell panels across main thoroughfares to diffuse sunlight into a perpetual golden hour. Romantic? Sure. Practical? Debatable. Scrolls complain about residents constantly tripping over the mayor's aesthetic nonsense. But here's the true marvel. They pulled this off without reinforced concrete or CAD software. Just trial, error, and a lot of drowned prototypes. One tablet recounts a public trial for an engineer whose experimental floating plaza detached and became a rogue island that terrorized fishermen for months. The punishment? Forced to live in a hilltop village. The horror. You're passing a collapsed tavern now. Go ahead, peek through the cracked amphora. Those speckled shells on the floor aren't decor, they're ancient bar snacks. Imagine bellying up to a counter, ordering a kelp ale, and getting a bowl of still wriggling sea snails. Happy hour was literal. As the water grows colder, your limbs start to feel heavier. That's not fatigue, it's the weight of 3,500 years pressing down, asking if you'd have the guts to build a civilization where your ceiling is a crashing wave. Ahead, the street slopes sharply into darkness. Somewhere down there, a seaweed mortar mixer lies half-buried, its wooden handle still waiting for a grip that's long since dissolved. But don't worry. We'll follow that slope soon enough. For now, let the tide rock you sideways, like the city's first residents did during their midday naps. The shell-filtered light dapples your eyelids, and somewhere in the distance, a school of fish clatters over a sunken bell, ringing out the hours in a language only the drowned can understand. The secret to this underwater utopia wasn't magic, it was a snorkel so janky, it'd make a scuba instructor weep. Picture yourself as a laborer in 1600 BCE, reporting for your shift at the city's underwater quarry. Your boss hands you a hollowed-out bull rush stalk, a pig bladder inflated like a grotesque balloon, and a leather strap to lash it all to your head. Congratulations, you're now OSHA certified in Bronze Age deep-sea construction. You'd think breathing underwater would be the hard part, but no, the real challenge is not inhaling a rogue jellyfish. The snorkel works, sort of. The bladder traps a pocket of air that's 30% oxygen and 70% your own panicked exhales. Every few minutes, you breach the surface like a gasping seal to refill it, while your foreman yells, "Hurry up, the tide's turning," in a language that sounds like dolphins arguing. Let's break down the genius here. Mainstream historians agree these bladders were the first portable oxygen tanks, predating modern scuba gear by 3,500 years. But the quirky twist? Workers personalized their rigs. Some carved curse words into their stocks to scare off sea demons. Others glued on seashells for better airflow aesthetics. One guy even strapped a dead starfish to his as a lucky charm, until it started decomposing mid-dive. You're kneeling on the quarry floor now, chiseling limestone blocks while parrotfish nibble your toe hair. The bladder's rubbery taste fills your mouth. Imagine licking a bicycle tire marinated in salt water. Every swing of your hammer sends bubbles swirling upward, tickling your nose. A moray eel watches from a crevice, judging your technique. Historians still argue whether these contraptions caused chronic headaches or just eternal regret. But here's the kicker, workers logged 8-hour shifts. 8. How? Breaks involved floating to a seaweed hammock strung between columns, where you'd snack on fermented squid jerky and complain about the foreman. Scrolls reveal the city's most popular song was literally titled, "My Bladder Has a Leak, Again." Your hands are pruning into raisins, but there's no clock underwater. Time is measured in bladder refills and the gradual numbing of your buttocks. Suddenly, a shadow passes overhead, a sea turtle dragging an abandoned fishing net. Your coworker gestures wildly, "Don't move, it'll think you're coral." Too late. The net snags your snorkel, yanking you into a slow-motion rodeo ride across the quarry. This actually happened. A tablet recounts a worker who got tangled in a turtle's net, rode it halfway to Crete, and returned 3 days later with a sunburn and a new tattoo reading, Poseidon's Uber. Management docked his pay for unapproved travel. As you wrestle free, notice the quarry walls. Those zigzagging tool marks aren't random, they're Bronze Age ergonomics. Workers angle chisels to avoid shoulder strain, a technique modern physical therapists call shockingly advanced. The limestone itself was chosen because it glowed faintly under bioluminescent algae, creating a natural, night shift, lighting system. But let's talk about the elephant, or rather, the octopus in the room. How did they handle, bathroom breaks? The answer's etched on a surviving chamber pot: hold it or use the designated current. The city planners installed strategic underwater tunnels where urine could be politely swept away to the open ocean. Classy. You're chiseling again, the rhythm syncing with your heartbeat. Clink, clink, clink. Each strike sends puffs of limestone dust drifting like underwater snow. A curious grouper mouths your elbow, mistaking your sweat for plankton. The pig bladder's air turns warm and metallic, but you've got quotas to meet. Somewhere above, the sun is setting, painting the surface in liquid gold. Down here, it's eternal twilight, the perfect cover for sneaking a 20-minute nap behind a particularly large sponge. As your shift winds down, you float past the break room, a coral outcropping where someone scratched a crude game of tic-tac-toe. The loser's name is still visible: Cassandra owes 5 snails. Ahead lies the ascent, that blissful moment when you rocket toward the surface, bladder empty, lungs screaming, and dignity long since abandoned. But wait. Before you go, rub your thumb over the quarry wall. Feel those grooves? They're not just tool marks. Workers left coded messages in the patterns. Complaints about wages, love notes to surface-dwelling sweethearts, and one particularly elaborate ode to a mermaid that ends with, "Her kiss tasted like low tide." As you rise, the water brightens from murky green to turquoise. Schools of sardines part around you like living confetti. Your ears pop, the bladder deflates into a sad rubber flap, and you breach the surface to a sunset so vivid, it almost makes the hypothermia worth it. Almost. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. But for now, let the waves cradle you back to shore, where a hot bowl of sea urchin stew awaits. Well, hot being relative, it's lukewarm algae broth with spines. As you drift off to sleep in your reed hut, the rhythm of the quarry follows you into dreams. Clink, clink, clink. You've traded the quarry's clink-clink for the market district's silent chaos, a place where haggling requires the dexterity of a mime and the patience of a clam. Imagine trying to buy a loaf of bread while holding your breath, your cheeks bulging like a pufferfish's, as a vendor emphatically gestures that no, 3 cowrie shells won't cover the artisanal seaweed sourdough. Welcome to grocery shopping, Bronze Age style. The market's layout is a masterclass in underwater efficiency. Stalls curve in a spiral to minimize current drag, their tables propped on stilts made of stacked oyster shells. Overhead, nets strung with bioluminescent jellyfish act as flickering chandeliers. You're not just browsing, you're navigating a gastronomic obstacle course. Dodge the dangling squid ink sacks. Sidestep the crab claw display. And whatever you do, don't make sudden movements near the live octopus tank. Mainstream history loves to romanticize ancient agora, but here's the reality check. Haggling here isn't a debate, it's a full-body sport. Vendors communicate in a sign language so elaborate, it makes semaphore look like toddler scribbles. Want to complain about prices? Cross your arms and flutter your fingers like a disappointed anglerfish. Offering half payment? Tap your nose twice and pretend to sneeze, it's symbolic for, I'm broke but charming. The system worked, until someone got too literal. Scrolls tell of a customer who mimed, I'll give you my left sandal, and woke up shoeless, clutching a suspiciously damp loaf. Let's linger at the fishmonger's stall. Those glistening sea bream aren't on ice, they're still breathing, kept alive in woven reed cages until purchase. Sustainability before it was trendy. The monger eyes you, then slaps a fish twice. Translation, fresh today. You counter by puffing your cheeks and pointing at the fish's cloudy left eye. This one's been napping since yesterday. He concedes by shrugging and tossing in a free handful of shrimp. Deal. Historians still argue whether these markets operated daily or only during calm tide festivals. One faction cites ledgers showing daily oyster sales, another insists the hand signals were mostly for show, like underwater kabuki theater. The quirkiest theory? The entire district was a front for a clandestine pearl smuggling ring. Evidence, a stall labeled Turnip Emporium, that contained 0 turnips and 347 pearls. You're drawn to the spice merchant next, a rogue's gallery of floating pouches. Cumin sinks, paprika hovers, and saffron drifts upward like edible confetti. Buying requires precision. Scoop your desired amount into a weighted bag before it escapes. Pro tip, never sneeze near the chili flakes. A tablet recounts a shopper who accidentally created an underwater smoke bomb, causing a panicked squid to ink the entire produce section. But the real marvel? The lack of bags. Shoppers carried purchases in, well, themselves. Nets woven from human hair, donated or found, were tied around waists, creating bulging underwater fanny packs. Lose your net? Hope your tunic's hem is sturdy. One scroll praises a mother of 6 who hauled a week's groceries in her sleeves, emerging like a very confused jellyfish. As you pass the bakery stall, a waft of yeast hits your nose, or would, if water didn't muffle smells. Instead, you taste the bread through the water, a faint tang of fermented kelp. The loaves are denser than cannonballs, designed to survive both baking and buoyancy. Drop one, and it'll sink through the ocean floor to the Earth's mantle. Suddenly, a commotion. A customer accuses a wine vendor of watering down his amphory. The argument escalates into a slow-motion slap fight, their movements exaggerated by the water's resistance. Spectators circle, snacking on salted urchin roe like it's dinner theater. The vendor finally proves his innocence by chugging a sample, a move that backfires when the current carries his exhalations into a passing nurse shark's nostrils. Here's a sensory detail to haunt your dreams, the market's soundtrack. Without air to carry sound, you hear vibrations through your bones. A merchant pounding octopus tender? Feels like a distant headache. A child's laughter? Tiny bubbles tickling your ribs. It's less a shopping trip and more a full-body ASMR session. As you exit with your hairnet full of dubious seafood, notice the graffiti scratched into a pillar, a crude drawing of a grumpy fish with the caption, "Market prices stink worse than low tide." Some things never change. Ahead, the street slopes toward the temple district, where the priests swore they could negotiate with the tides, for a modest donation. But that's a story for after you've digested your questionable oyster purchase. For now, let the market's rhythm lull you. The sway of jellyfish lamps, the ballet of haggling hands, the gentle bloop of a bread loaf escaping its net and beginning its eternal journey to the seafloor. You're not just carrying groceries, you're a living part of the supply chain, a cog in the machine that kept a city alive beneath the waves. And if that thought doesn't make you feel insignificant enough to drift off, wait until we discuss the chamber pots. You're approaching the temple district now, where the water grows colder and the shadows longer, not because of depth, but because the priests insisted on ambience. The coral spires ahead glow faintly, their ridges crusted with barnacle candles that ooze bioluminescent slime. This isn't just a holy sight, it's the Bronze Age equivalent of a Vegas lounge, complete with mood lighting and a cover charge. Step closer. The entrance arch is carved with a relief of a grumpy-looking Poseidon flanked by mermaids holding abacuses. Because nothing says divine wrath like a sea deity with a solid grasp of accounting. This is where the priests claim to negotiate with the tides, offering prayers in exchange for calm seas, fertile fishing grounds, and, this is key, a 15% cut of everyone's oyster harvest. Mainstream history will tell you temples were centers of power, but here's the twist: these priests weren't just spiritual leaders, they were the original influencers. Their miracles relied on understanding tidal patterns, which they predict using seaweed calendars and a healthy dose of theatrics. Need a storm diverted? For 5 gold cowrie shells, the high priest would don a crown of dead man's fingers, the algae, not actual digits, and chant into a conch shell until the current shifted. Coincidence? Sure. Effective? The coffers say yes. You're passing the offering pool now, its basin filled with sand dollars, shark teeth, and one perplexed crab. Drop a pearl here, and the priests promise to whisper your name to the currents. Skip your taxes, and they'd accidentally forget to warn the town about next week's riptides. It was divine protection with a Yelp review system. Here's the quirky bit, the infamous mermaid tax. Scrolls reveal citizens had to donate 1 polished gem per lunar cycle to appease the merfolk ambassadors. Why? Because the priests claimed mermaids were fiscally sensitive and would capsize ships if their bling quota wasn't met. The gems were then ritually submerged in a secret trench, which archaeologists later found stuffed in a priest's private sauna room. Historians still argue whether the clergy believed their own hype. One faction cites prayer tablets filled with sincere pleas like, "Oh mighty currents, please don't drown my idiot son-in-law." Others point to a hidden ledger titled, "Emergency Funds," for land purchases, in case this whole thing sinks. Let's get tactile. Brush your hand against the offering pool's rim, those grooves aren't erosion. They're tally marks from centuries of citizens scraping off barnacles to check if their gems were still there. Spoiler, they never were. Ahead lies the inner sanctum, where the high priest performed his most sacred duty, napping. That's right. Divination involved lounging on a spongy kelp bed until the sea spoke through dreams. One particularly honest tablet reads, "Vision unclear. Tried again after second nap. Still unclear. Recommended raising tuna tax. You're ducking under a curtain of braided eelgrass now, into a chamber where the walls pulse with trapped air bubbles. This is where they stored the holy relics, a trident forged from meteorite iron, stolen from a passing trader, a cloak woven from moon jellyfish tentacles, sticky, not stylish, and the petrified remains of the first tax collector, later identified as a confused walrus. But the real showstopper? The tide lever. A 5-ton limestone contraption that supposedly controlled the ocean's moods. Pull it left for high tide. Push right for low. In reality, it was connected to nothing but the priest's flair for drama. During ceremonies, acolytes hidden in the walls would yank ropes to make the lever shudder miraculously, while the head priest bellowed, "Behold the power of, that guy over there," and pointed at a random fisherman in the crowd. Here's a reality check. Modern oceanographers confirm the city's bay had predictable tidal flows. The priest's miracles were just good timing and better PR. But try telling that to a Bronze Age sailor who just watched his storm-tossed boat magically survive, 5 minutes after the temple's donation box got a new coat of paint. As you drift toward the sanctum's exit, notice the graffiti near the floor, a crudely etched mermaid rolling her eyes, caption "Taxes paid, still got kelp in my sandals." Some truths are eternal. Outside, the water brightens slightly. You're back in the main thoroughfare, where a street vendor is selling blessed sea urchins, dipped in gold flecks and marked up 300%. The priests might be gone, but their legacy lives on in every timeshare seminar and infomercial. Ahead, the street slopes toward the residential quarter, where even the chamber pots were over-engineered. But before we explore pearl-encrusted toilets, let's pause here in the temple's shadow. Close your eyes and listen, not with your ears, but your ribs. Feel that faint vibration? It's not the tide. It's the collective sigh of 1,000 ancient citizens, whispering, "We knew it was a scam, but what if it wasn't?" The water carries you forward, past a broken column where a priest once chiseled, "For a good time, ask about our bulk discount on salvation." The current tugs at your sleeves, eager to show you where the oyster farmers finally snapped under taxation. But rebellion underwater moves slowly, like a crab stuck in molasses. There's time yet to float, to linger in the temple's cool, cynical embrace. You're floating over the city's greatest flex, a network of pipes that laughed in the face of physics. These aren't your garden-variety aqueducts, these are inverted stone siphons that somehow shoved fresh water uphill from the ocean floor. Let that sink in. A civilization without calculus or caffeine managed to outsmart gravity using little more than geometry and spite. Start by running your fingers along one of the pipes. Cold basalt, smoother than a politician's promise, curves upward in defiance of all logic. The secret? A labyrinth of air pockets and pressure chambers that turn the Mediterranean's own weight against it. Imagine explaining this to a Roman engineer. Yes, we pull H2O from beneath the sea. No, you can't see the blueprints. Mainstream historians agree it's an engineering marvel. These siphons predate Archimedes' screw by centuries. But here's the quirky twist. The pipes were lined with fermented shark cartilage. Not for structural integrity, mind you. Scrolls reveal the architect believed sharks embodied the spirit of flow, because they never stop moving. The resulting stench? Considered a bonus feature to deter pipe thieves. You're following the pipe's path now, climbing an incline that shouldn't exist underwater. Up ahead, a pressure valve shaped like a screaming gorgon's face marks a junction. This is where the magic happened. Workers would chant rhythmic hymns, less for ritual, more to coordinate the opening of floodgates in sync with tidal patterns. One wrong note, and the system would hiccup a geyser of fresh water into the nearest fish market. Historians still argue whether the engineers understood fluid dynamics or just got lucky. One faction cites precise mathematical carvings near the reservoir. Another points to a tablet where the chief plumber scribbled, "Tried making pipe bigger. Water went whoosh." The truth likely lies somewhere between genius and hold my kelp beer. Let's talk maintenance. Every full moon, teams of pipe dancers would shimmy through the tunnels, their bodies coated in dolphin fat to squeeze through bends. Their tools? Sea urchin spines for scraping mineral deposits and a lot of existential dread. One worker's diary survives, day 37, found a shrimp living in valve 6. Named him Steve. He judges me. You've reached the reservoir, a domed chamber where sunlight filters through a crystal lens in the ceiling, creating rainbows that dance across freshwater pooled atop saltwater. It's like a rave thrown by Mother Nature herself. Drink from the carved oyster shell cup, provided for quality testing, and taste the irony. Crisp, sweet water sourced from an underground spring, surrounded by an ocean that could kill you if you sipped it. Here's a reality check. Modern engineers using 3D modeling still can't replicate the system's efficiency. A 2017 attempt in Malta resulted in a fountain that shot anchovies into a tourist bus. The secret might have been the pipe's slight wobble, a design quickly dismissed as a flaw until simulations showed it prevented sediment buildup. Take that, MIT. Notice the graffiti near the overflow channel? A cartoonish squid scrawled in charcoal declares, "Publius loves Marcia inside a heart." Turns out, even infrastructure projects couldn't escape Bronze Age PDA. As you drift through the chamber, the pipes hum with the memory of rushing water. Place your palm against the wall, the vibration feels like a purring cat, if the cat were a 50-ton hydraulic system. This close, you can spot repair patches made from mashed sea sponges and regret. One particularly shoddy fix bears the note, temporary solution, 3rd year anniversary. But let's pause to appreciate the sheer audacity. While surface cities fought over wells, these engineers turned their biggest threat, the ocean, into a collaborator. They weaponized physics in an era when most people thought the moon was a moody god's toenail clipping. Ahead, the pipe narrows into a tunnel where a single leak could have drowned the entire block. Workers here relied on current whisperers, people who claimed to sense pressure changes by the tingling in their left earlobe. Spoiler, they were mostly just dehydrated. As you exit the reservoir, the pipes slope downward again, funneling water to communal baths, breweries, and, crucially, the world's first underwater bidet. Priorities, people. But here's the kicker, the system's collapse wasn't due to engineering failure. A scroll from the final day's laments, spring went salty. God's angry? Or did Steve the shrimp clog something? Modern core samples suggest an earthquake shifted the freshwater source, but try telling that to a priest blaming mermaid tax evasion. The pipes end abruptly at a shattered valve, its edges crusted with centuries of coral. Beyond lies the postal district, where the city's love affair with bad ideas continued. Picture clay tablets tied to crab legs, guaranteed delivery in 3 tides, and the inevitable chaos when squid migration season hit. But that's a tale best told with a sleeping mask and a Xanax. For now, let the rhythm of invisible water lull you, the ghostly gurgle of siphons long dormant, the echo of a worker's chant, left valve, right valve, pray to the moon, and the distant, judgmental stare of Steve's shrimp descendants. You're not just floating through ruins, you're a temporary vessel in a 3,500-year-old plumbing system, a reminder that even the mightiest innovations eventually become someone else's bedtime story. You're knee-deep in bureaucracy now, specifically, the city's postal system, which made DMV lines look efficient. Picture this, clay tablets wrapped in squid skin, tied to crab legs with seaweed twine, and guaranteed to arrive in 3 tides. The system worked flawlessly, until squid migration season hit, and half the mail carriers eloped with their crustacean steeds. Let's unpack that. The city's postal service relied on trained crabs, specifically, blue-legged swimmers bred for speed and indifference. Each crab wore a tiny harness with a waterproof message tube. The problem? Crabs are terrible employees. One scroll laments, 3rd time this week, Gary the carrier ate his assignment. Another warns, Do not send perishable gossip via crab. Results, soggy. You're standing in the sorting hub now, where clerks stamp tablets with seals made of mollusk glue. The air, well, water, reeks of ink and crushed hopes. A harried worker shoves a crab into its harness while muttering, "If you molt mid-delivery, I swear to Poseidon." The crab responds by snapping its claws in Morse code for unionize. Historians still argue whether the crab post was genius or madness. One faction cites efficiency records showing 70% on-time delivery. Another points to a tablet titled Urgent Tax Notice found 2,000 years later in a hermit crab's shell. The quirkiest theory? The crabs were secretly running a black market kelp trade. Evidence, a ledger listing, Gary's side hustle, 50 sacks, paid in shrimp. But let's talk about the squidpocalypse. Every spring, giant squid migrated through the city, turning postal routes into an ink-blotted obstacle course. Crabs panicked. Letters dissolved. One tablet recounts a citizen receiving a blank, ink-stained slab with a note, "Your message now abstract art." Complaints to Gary. "You're dodging a frantic crab now, its harness trailing shredded kelp." Ahead, a clerk tries to reroute deliveries via turtle. The turtle, unimpressed, eats the map. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Workers began stuffing messages into hollowed-out pufferfish and letting them float away. Delivery time? Eventually. Here's a reality check. Modern attempts to replicate this system failed spectacularly. A 1998 experiment in Belize resulted in crabs unionizing and holding a resort hostage for extra brine. As you exit the postal hub, notice the graffiti. "Gary was here" etched into a pillar, alongside a crude crab waving a middle claw. The more things change. The water grows colder as you drift toward the palace, where even the king's decrees got lost in transit. A half-open tablet floats past, its message faded, "Urgent, fix the pipes before, the rest is eaten by barnacles." Priorities, right? But here's the kicker, the postal collapse wasn't the system's fault. A scroll reveals the real issue. Citizens kept sending reply crabs to argue with tax notices. Gridlock ensued. Classic. As the current pulls you onward, let the absurdity cradle you. The click-clack of crab claws fades, replaced by the distant thrum of a city drowning in its own red tape. Ahead lies the luxury district, where even chamber pots were gilded, but that's a story best told after a stiff kelp cocktail. For now, let the crabs scuttle through your dreams, dragging fragments of lost love letters and half-eaten tax forms. The sea never forgets, it just files things under miscellaneous. You've floated past the pipes, now, prepare to confront the ultimate symbol of Bronze Age excess, the pearl-encrusted chamber pot. That's right. Even their toilets were fancier than your wedding china. Archaeologists nearly choked on their snorkels when they unearthed these porcelain thrones, each inlaid with iridescent abalone and perched on tiny coral pedestals. Because nothing says civilization like defecating in style. Let's set the scene. You're in a residential alley, where every doorway frames a mosaic of seaweed and crushed mollusk shells. Inside, the humblest fisherman's hut boasts a sanctuary of relief that'd make a French monarch blush. The pots themselves are works of art, hand-painted with leaping dolphins, fitted with ergonomic seats, tested on royal buttocks, no doubt, and, this is key, lined with a layer of crushed pearls to neutralize odors. Spoiler, they did not. Mainstream history adores these pots as proof of universal luxury, but here's the twist. They were mandatory. City law required every household to install one by decree of King Thalassos III, who once declared, "A kingdom's greatness is measured by its subjects' bowel movements." He also had a gold-plated bidet, but that's another story. You're hovering over one now. Go ahead, lift the lid. The hinges creak like a ghost sighing, revealing an interior stained with 3,000-year-old, let's call it, organic patina. The pearls glint mockingly. Why, you whisper. The answer drifts from a nearby scroll, to honor the sea's bounty, even in our waste. Sure. Or maybe someone just really wanted an excuse to grind up oysters. Historians still argue whether these pots were status symbols or ritual objects. One faction claims the pearls acted as offerings to sewage deities. Another insists they were early SEO, literally flush with keywords to impress neighbors. Oh, this old thing? Just my abalone-accented waste receptacle. No big deal. But here's the quirky bit: maintenance. Each pot had to be scoured monthly with vinegar made from fermented jellyfish. The job fell to apprenticeships nobody wanted, hence the ancient classified ad, seeking strong-stomached individual for glamorous pearl-polishing career. Must-own bucket. You're tracing a finger over the pot's rim now, feeling the grooves worn by generations of hurried lids. Imagine the conversations here. A wife hissing, "Don't scratch the pearls, Demetrius, we have guests." A child being scolded, "If you miss again, you're cleaning it with your tunic." And let's not forget the sound. Underwater, everything moves slowly, including, unfortunately, the inevitable splashback. Residents developed a delicate hovering technique praised in scrolls as the art of the mindful hover. One overachiever even wrote a manual, 7 steps to a splash-free life. Step 4, become one with the current. Here's a reality check. Modern tests prove the pearls did have a purpose. Crushed into the glaze, they released calcium carbonate, slightly neutralizing the water's acidity. So, technically, they were the world's first pH-balanced toilets. Take that, Charmin. But luxury has its downsides. Thieves would dive through open windows, risking life and limb to pry pearls from, well, you know. A tablet recounts a notorious bandit who stole 17 pots before getting caught mid-heist by a grandma wielding a salted eel. His punishment? Forced to use a clay pot for a year. The horror. As you drift into the next room, notice the wall art. A fresco of a smiling octopus holding a chamber pot, captioned "A happy home is a regular home." The propaganda was strong here. Even the city's children's rhymes included gems like, "Flush with pride, let the pearls be your guide." But let's talk about the elephant, or rather, the plumbing. Remember those genius inverted pipes from Section 6? They connected directly to these pots, whisking waste away through a network of pressurized tunnels. The system was so efficient, historians found petrified deposits, still intact in offshore trenches. One particularly poetic scholar called them the Pompeii of poop. Suddenly, a glint catches your eye, a pot tilted askew, its underside scratched with the words "The lasso's sucks." Even ancient rebels had graffiti. As you exit, the water grows warmer. You're approaching the Palace District, where the chamber pots are gold-plated and the problems are tax-related. But before we wade into soggy revolts and oyster-based uprisings, let's linger here in the humble bathroom. Close your eyes and listen, not to the silence, but to the echoes of 1,000 sighs of relief, the clink of pearl lids, the grumbles of apprentices on vinegar duty. Democracy may be a Greek invention, but indoor plumbing with flair? That's all underwater, baby. The current tugs you onward, past a broken pot spilling its iridescent secrets. A crab scuttles over the rim, claiming squatters' rights. Ahead, the streets widen into the market square, where the air, well, water, still smells faintly of fermented squid and regret. But that's a journey for after you've processed the existential wonder of a society that gilded its toilets before inventing the wheel. For now, let the absurdity cradle you. Each pearl, each dolphin motif, each pH-balanced flush is a lullaby murmuring, "You too could have been royalty, if only you'd appreciated the art of the hover." The year is 1492 BCE, and you're knee-deep in oyster muck, your hands raw from prying shells apart while eels nibble your toenails. Life as a farmer here isn't glamorous, until the tax collector arrives, riding a sedan chair carried by 4 burly divers. He unfurls a scroll with a dramatic flick, sending a startled flounder fleeing, and declares, by order of the king, a 1% levy on all shellfish, for the glory of the tides. You stare at your calloused palms, then at your meager harvest. 1%. That's 3 oysters per basket. 3. Do you know how long it takes to shuck a Bronze Age oyster? Let's just say the term, side hustle, hadn't been invented yet. Welcome to history's soggiest revolt. Mainstream history loves to cite taxes as revolt triggers, but here's the twist: this wasn't tea dumped in a harbor. This was oysters hurled in slow motion. Farmers began by passive-aggressively gifting the king baskets of shells filled with live crabs. When that failed, they organized the first underwater strike, floating cross-armed in the palace plaza while their oysters sat unshucked. Scabs were dealt with via strategic urchin placement in their loincloths. You're wading through the protest now, where the water thrums with muffled chants. Farmers wave clamshells carved with slogans, 1% today, 100% tomorrow, and make oysters boring again. A particularly inventive rebel wears a helmet made of glued-together muscles, which he insists is both armor and dinner. The mood is part revolution, part improv comedy. Historians still argue whether the tax was the real spark. One faction claims the king needed funds for his doomed, floating lighthouse project. Another points to a leaked scroll where the queen scribbled, "I just think pearls are prettier than people." But the quirkiest theory? The tax collector had a shellfish allergy and this was his villain origin story. Let's talk tactics. Underwater, fire isn't an option, so rebels got creative. They redirected sewage pipes to flood the palace's ceremonial courtyard, the famed Brown Tide incident. They trained octopuses to steal tax ledgers. One farmer even invented a rudimentary torpedo by stuffing a hollowed-out log with explosive sea cucumber mucus. It fizzled, but the effort earned him a folk song, "Oh, Stavros tried to blow up the throne / now he's picking barnacles off the king's bidet." You're sidestepping a protester now, his arms full of evidence oysters, each shell etched with royal tax codes in tiny, furious script. He shoves one into your hands. Inside, instead of a pearl, there's a pebble painted like a sad face. Subtlety is dead. The rebellion's piece de resistance? The Great Shell Swap. Farmers spent months replacing the palace's decorative abalone tiles with painted limestone replicas, funneling the real shells into a secret reef. When the king finally noticed, his screech was heard in Sardinia. But here's the kicker, the revolt worked, sort of. The tax was repealed, but replaced with a voluntary donation system that suspiciously still totaled 1%. The farmers claimed victory anyway and celebrated by throwing a feast where everyone got 2 free oysters. Progress. As you drift past the palace gates, notice the new murals. They depict the king benevolently granting tax relief while a tiny figure in the corner, probably Stavros, is being chased by a very cross lobster. History is written by the victors, but doodled by the bored. The water here tastes faintly of irony and old shellfish. Ahead lies the royal archives, where scribes scrambled to rebrand the whole mess as the Blessed Adjustment. But before we sanitize history, let's pause at a rebel's hut. Inside, a child's clay doll wears a seaweed crown, a playtime king toppling under the weight of a pebble scepter. Even toddlers got the message. As the current carries you toward the next crisis, spoiler, the Postal Service's ill-advised squid couriers, let the rebellion's absurdity lull you. The slow-motion punches, the crab-based sabotage, the mollusk propaganda, it's a reminder that even underwater, humanity's favorite pastime is tilting at barnacled windmills. Close your eyes. Hear the distant clink of shell against stone, the gurgle of a protester's defiant bubble shout, the rasp of urchin spines being carefully arranged in a tax collector's sandals. Democracy may move at the speed of mud, but it moves. You're in the wine cellar now, surrounded by amphorae stacked like drunken soldiers. These aren't just storage jars, they're the Bronze Age version of a Twitter feed, scrawled with rants, recipes, and one particularly ominous doodle of a squid wearing a crown. But the real gems? The doomsday prophecies, etched by bored, and very tipsy, scribes after one too many cups of fermented kelp wine. Beware the day the sea swallows its own shadow, one warns. Another insists, when the oysters grow legs, run. Spoiler, one of these was shockingly accurate. Start by running your fingers over the nearest jar. The clay is pocked with barnacles, but the inscription beneath remains crisp, Year of the Jellyfish. Bad harvest. Worse wine. End times? Classic Bronze Age Yelp review. Archaeologists found over 200 such jars, their messages ranging from pragmatic, stockpile sea urchins, to unhinged, the octopi are judging us. The kicker? Several predicted the city's collapse with eerie specificity. Or just got lucky during a bender. Mainstream history loves these jars as economic records. They track wine shipments, taxes, and the occasional existential crisis. But here's the twist: workers were encouraged to write anything to combat amphora ennui. Think of it as ancient therapy, subsidized by the crown. One scribe's journal admits, "I may have implied a giant crab would destroy us, but the ink was free." You're tilting a jar to read its underside. The text here is shakier, as if carved mid-hangover. If you find this, I'm dead. Also, the western wall's gonna crack on Tuesday. Turns out, the wall did crack, 3 centuries later. Coincidence? A nearby farmer's tablet grumbles, Pelops called it prophecy, I call him lucky guesser who owes me 12 snails. Historians still argue whether these prophecies held weight. One faction cites a jar that reads, "The sea will claim what we stole from it," found near the collapsed freshwater pipes. Another points out that 97% of prophecies are just complaints about the wine, tastes like dolphin feet. The quirkiest theory? The scribes were playing an ancient drinking game where predicting apocalypses earned extra pours. Here's a sensory deep dive. The cellar's stale wine still perfumes the water, a tannic tang that pricks your tongue like static. Brine has warped the jar's once pungent contents into something biologists politely call marine vinegar. But in its heyday, this wine was the city's lifeblood, a salty, fishy Pinot Grigio knockoff that paired terribly with oysters. Notice the handprints fossilized in the sediment? Those belong to one Lukos, a scribe who signed his prophecies with a thumbprint and the title, Drunk Oracle of the Third Tide. His magnum opus, Beware the Silent Fish. Scholars now think he meant sediment-clogged gills, or maybe he just hated mackerel. But let's talk about the jar that started it all, an amphora near the back, cracked open in 1987 to reveal, final warning, the pillars will fall when the moon bleeds. Cue the chills. Because guess what? The city sank during a lunar eclipse, when copper-red light stained the waves. Spooky, right? Until you learn the same jar also claims, the mayor's wife is a sea hag, which, less spooky, more petty workplace gossip. You're tracing a prophecy now that's equal parts poetry and panic. We build our beds where the waves dream. Soon they'll wake. It's carved in looping, lyrical script, right beside a crude doodle of a man riding a turtle. Priorities. As you drift toward the cellar's exit, the jars seem to murmur. Maybe it's the current whistling through their necks, or maybe it's the ghosts of ancient vintners still bitter about their Yelp reviews. One amphora's base bears the ultimate Bronze Age mood, why bother? Everything's underwater anyway. But here's the reality check. Modern data shows the city sank gradually, not in a single cataclysm. So why the prophecies? Maybe stress-induced clairvoyance. Maybe fermented kelp wine's a hell of a drug. Or maybe, when you live 60 feet below the waves, every hiccup feels like doomsday. Ahead, moonlight filters through a crack in the ceiling, the same crack Pelops predicted. It's widened now, a jagged scar where moray eels dart like living stitches. Beyond lies the Scholars' Quarter, where the debate over moon blood versus bad engineering raged until the ink ran dry. But that's a headache for tomorrow's hangover. For now, let the prophecies lull you. The gentle clink of jars settling into silt, the whisper of a turtle-riding doodle come to life, the metallic aftertaste of wine that outlived its prophets. You're floating through a drunk dial to the future, where the end is nigh, is really just a cry for better vintage. Sweet dreams, and maybe skip the kelp wine tonight. The city's demise wasn't a dramatic explosion or a Kraken attack, it was a slow, wet sigh. One day, the market vendors noticed their pearl-inlaid chamber pots tilting slightly south. The next, the temple's tide lever started creaking like a pensioner's knees. By the time priests blamed mermaid tax evasion, the western wall had already dissolved into a cloud of limestone confetti. The question isn't if the city sank, but why, and do the theories flow faster than a broken sewage pipe? Let's start with the crowd pleaser, the earthquake sinkhole. Mainstream geologists point to sediment cores showing a massive tectonic sneeze around 1200 BCE. Imagine the seafloor yawning open like a jet-lagged god, swallowing entire neighborhoods whole. But here's the quirky twist, the city's own scrolls predicted this. Sort of. A priest's wine-stained diary reads, dreamt of earth belching. Suggested fasting. King ate 3 lobsters instead. You're floating over the fissure now, its edges fringed with brittle coral. Touch the rock, it's unnervingly warm, thanks to lingering geothermal tantrums. This crack isn't just a wound, it's a Rorschach test for scholars. Optimists see proof of plate tectonics. Conspiracy theorists whisper about ancient geothermal energy experiments gone wrong. Evidence, a nearby tablet titled Hot Rock Ideas, do not show wife. Now, the sea god theory. Picture Poseidon, bored out of his divine mind, flicking a finger to drown the city because its chamber pots were too fabulous. Priests loved this angle, it let them shrug, told you to pay your taxes, while ignoring their own shoddy engineering. A surviving hymn warbles, "O mighty trident, we regret the undercooked squid sacrifices, please stop." But here's the kicker, modern divers found a stone altar weighted with 200 silver ingots at the fissure's edge. Coincidence? Or a last-ditch bribe to Neptune? Historians still argue whether this was pious desperation or a priestly embezzlement scheme gone aquatic. Then there's the math. Oh, the math. Turns out, building underwater requires more than seaweed mortar and vibes. Scrolls reveal the city's architects used a numbering system based on clam sizes, because why use Arabic numerals when you can have small, medium, and, oh gods, the walls bulging? Their calculations for wall thickness included a margin of error labeled Poseidon's whim. You're hovering near the cracked reservoir pipe now, where a critical equation was etched, water pressure equals yes. Later scholars translated this as a philosophical koan. It wasn't. The real tragedy? They almost fixed it. Excavations revealed a half-built buttress near the palace, its stones neatly stacked, and then abandoned. Why? A worker's tablet explains, foreman said lunch first. Never came back. Priorities. But let's get tactile. Scoop a handful of sand from the fissure. See those glassy shards? They're volcanic obsidian, spat up during the quake. Now imagine that raining down on a city already neck-deep in seawater. The residents didn't stand a chance, though some tried. Archaeologists found a noble skeleton clutching a pearl-encrusted chamber pot like a life raft. Priorities, Part 2. Here's a reality check. Modern simulations show the city could have survived either the earthquake or the bad math. But both? That's the Bronze Age equivalent of texting while driving into a tsunami. As you drift past the crumbled palace gates, notice the graffiti, "I told you so," signed, Steve the Shrimp. Okay, maybe not. But the sentiment lingers in the water, a brine-soaked, "We warned you," from every cracked pipe and listing column. Ahead, the fissure widens into a canyon where eels dart like living accusations. The current tugs you downward, into the dark where pressure pops your ears and the weight of hindsight presses like a lead blanket. This isn't just geology, it's a cautionary tale written in coral and hubris. But before we descend into the murk, let's surface for air. The moon hangs full, casting silver ripples over the ruins. Somewhere up there, Poseidon's probably chuckling into his trident, scrolling TikTok as another Silicon Valley billionaire tries, and fails, to replicate this mess in concrete. Speaking of, Silicon Valley billionaires love three things: disruption, acronyms, and the smell of their own submarine concrete failing. Since the 1990s, tech bros have been obsessed with reverse engineering the city's underwater mortar, a mix of volcanic ash, seaweed, and what one TED Talk called proto-emoji level innovation. Their attempts? Let's just say Elon Musk's Aquababble prototype now houses a very judgmental octopus off Malta. You're floating through a modern innovation hub now, a concrete dome where engineers in Patagonia vests stare at 3D printed seaweed. The vibe is part lab, part midlife crisis. Their goal? To recreate the city's indestructible concrete, which after 3,500 years underwater is still stronger than a New York landlord's lease agreement. The secret? Ancient artisans used marine vinegar, fermented jellyfish goo, as a binding agent. Modern attempts substitute kale smoothies. It's not going well. Mainstream science knows the original recipe's basics. Volcanic ash reacting with seawater forms crystals that self-heal cracks. But here's the quirky twist: scrolls reveal workers sang sea shanties while mixing mortar, believing rhythm aligned the particles. A 2018 Stanford study found vibrations do improve concrete density, but in turns crooning "Baby Shark" in the lab just made everyone quit. You're hovering over a revolutionary test slab now. Its surface bubbles like a witch's cauldron, dissolving into the Pacific while a CEO mutters, "It's a feature, not a bug." Nearby, a binder titled Project Atlantis 2.0 floats open to a page reading, Step 3. Profit. The real kicker? Archaeologists solved this mystery in 2003, but their paper was titled Cementitious Reactions in Subaqueous Tephra, so of course nobody read it. Historians still argue why tech moguls care. One faction claims it's about legacy, building a bunker for the apocalypse they're funding. Another points to a leaked email. If Romans had concrete, and these guys had better, imagine the VC funding. But the truth? It's about hubris. The same force that made pharaohs build pyramids now makes billionaires pour kombucha into cement mixers. Here's a tactile detail: run your hand over the modern concrete. It's gritty, like sandpaper dipped in regret. The ancient version? Smooth as a dolphin's conscience. The difference? Those long-dead workers added crushed seashells for texture, a trick modern labs dismiss as crunchy nonsense. But let's talk failures. In 2021, a crypto tycoon built an underwater innovation villa off Belize. It collapsed in 17 minutes, creating an artificial reef now called Founder's Folly. The local fish love it. As you drift past whiteboards covered in frantic equations, notice the post-it that reads, "What if we add nanobots?" Classic. Nearby, an engineer naps atop a report titled "Why Not Just Use Their Recipe?" The answer? Too simple. No IPO potential. The water here tastes like irony and Red Bull. Ahead, a prototype of an underwater drone lies beached, its arms clutching a chunk of ancient concrete like Excalibur. The drone's log reads, "Day 12, still no answers. Send snacks." But here's the kicker: the city's builders never meant their concrete to last millennia. They just wanted to keep the crabs out. A worker's tablet shrugs, if it holds till payday, good enough. Meanwhile, modern teams burn millions chasing eternity, and can't even get a slab to hold till lunch. As you exit the lab, the current carries you toward darker waters. Somewhere ahead, bioluminescent algae pulse in patterns only the drowned understand, ghostly streetlights for a city that mastered concrete but forgot to float. But that's a mystery for tomorrow's all-hands meeting. For now, let the rhythm of failing pumps lull you. Each clunk of a misaligned piston, each hiss of a billionaire's dissolving dream, each plink of a seashell laughing from the deep. Innovation isn't always progress, sometimes it's just the universe reminding us that old isn't obsolete, it's just waiting for us to catch up. You're floating through darkness so thick, it feels like the ocean itself is holding its breath. Then, there. A flicker of blue-green light pulses to your left, then another, until the abyss becomes a constellation of phantom lanterns. This isn't just bioluminescence, it's a ghostly reenactment of the city's grandest festival, playing on loop for an audience of eels and existential dread. The algae here don't just glow, they perform. Swirling into shapes of long-gone revelers, mimicking the torchlit parades that once snaked through these streets. A cluster blooms into the outline of a dancer, arms arched toward a spectral lyre player. Another forms a leaping dolphin, frozen mid-jump for 3 heartbeats before dissolving. It's like someone uploaded a Bronze Age rave to the cloud, if the cloud were made of plankton and regret. Mainstream science knows these dinoflagellates light up when disturbed, but here's the twist, their patterns mirror specific festivals down to the date. The Harvest of the Moon dance? Every July 14th, the algae swirl in exactly the same sequence, verified by 2,000-year-old scrolls. Coincidence? A marine biologist's TikTok on the phenomenon hit 10M views with the caption, "The ocean's a better historian than my PhD advisor." You're reaching out to touch a shimmering figure now. Your fingers pass through it, scattering light like aquatic fireflies. The algae cling to your skin briefly, spelling out what might be ancient Greek for party crasher. Don't worry, they're harmless. Mostly. One diver's log claims the lights once formed his ex's face blowing a kiss before disintegrating. He switched careers to accounting shortly after. Historians still argue whether these displays are accidental or the world's most patient art project. One faction cites sewage pipes leaking fermented grain into the algae's habitat, creating aquatic absinthe that unlocked their artistic side. Others point to mosaics showing priests dumping bioluminescent plankton into canals during festivals, essentially weaponizing rave culture for religious clout. But here's the quirky bit, the algae's rhythm syncs with your heartbeat. Slow your pulse, and the lights dim to a lullaby tempo. Panic, and they strobe like a submarine disco. Ancient partygoers allegedly used this trick for mood lighting during, romantic encounters. Scrolls boast of lovers' heartbeats making the very waves blush. Modern attempts to replicate this resulted in a viral video titled, "My Anxiety Gave the Ocean PTSD." You're drifting past the ghostly agora now, where algae vendors hawk invisible fish. Their cries vibrate through your bones as low, whale-like hums. A particularly ambitious patch forms the likeness of a baker pulling loaves from a furnace, a scene archaeologists confirmed matched a fresco in Section 4. The loaf even crumbles in real time, each glowing mote dissolving like salt in broth. Here's a reality check, Silicon Valley tried to monetize this. A startup launched BioGlow tours using drones to herd algae into viral-worthy shapes. It failed when the drones short-circuited and the algae spelled out, "Sell your stock." Nature, 1, Tech Brothers, 0. As you round a collapsed column, the lights coalesce into the city's legendary mermaid parade, glowing chariots pulled by seahorse silhouettes, merfolk tossing what appear to be glowing oysters into a crowd of spectral fish. It's breathtaking, until you notice a rebel algae cluster flipping off the procession. Some truths are universal. The scholarly debate rages, are these lights a microbial memory? A chemical echo of ancient wine spills? Or just the ocean trolling us with its screensaver? The answer's as murky as the water here, but lean in close, listen. That faint, rhythmic pulsing isn't just algae. It's the heartbeat of a city that partied too hard, loved too deep, and sank too soon, its final encore written in living light. Ahead, the darkness gathers again, but don't rush. Let the ghost light's cool fingers brush your eyelids, their whispers of forgotten revelries blending with your slowing pulse. You're not just watching history, you're swimming through its afterimage, a dream the sea refuses to stop dreaming. The ghost lights fade behind you, leaving only the tang of salt and something sweeter. You've drifted into a kitchen. Not just any kitchen, this one's shelves are lined with jars, their clay bellies swollen with pickled secrets. And there, on a warped wooden counter, sits the piece de resistance, a ceramic pot sealed with beeswax and hubris. Inside, bobbing in murky brine, float plums so perfectly preserved, their wrinkles look intentional. The chef's last snack, abandoned mid-bite when the sea came knocking. Let's get tactile. Pop the lid. The scent hits you first, vinegar's sharp punch mellowed by 30 centuries of patience. Reach in, don't overthink the sanitation, and pluck a plum. It's heavier than expected, its skin like a grandmother's handshake, firm, wrinkled, promising stories. The brine drips slowly, each drop hitting the floor with a plink that echoes through drowned time. Mainstream history adores this find as proof of ancient gastronomy. These plums weren't just preserved. They were curated. Scrolls reveal a recipe, honey, thyme, and seawater aged in moonlight for 3 tides. But here's the twist, the chef, one Lysandra, included a warning label, for guests who overstay welcome. Archaeologists found the jar hidden behind a loose tile, suggesting either culinary espionage or really passive-aggressive hosting. You're biting into the plum now. The flesh yields like a reluctant confession, releasing flavors that should have died with the Bronze Age, smoky sweetness, a whisper of oregano, and the unmistakable zing of seawater dental hygiene. It's not terrible. Modern foodies would pay $28 for this at a Brooklyn pop-up. Historians still argue whether the brine preserved the plums or the plums preserved the brine. One faction claims the fruit absorbed toxins, acting as a flavor sponge for tainted water. Others cite Lysandra's notes, if Demetrius complains about dinner again, he can eat the damn pits. The quirkiest theory? The plums were a failed immortality potion. Spoiler, lab tests found no magical properties, just enough salt to pickle a mermaid. But let's talk technique. Preservation here wasn't a hobby, it was survival. With no refrigerators, chefs relied on the sea's cold grip and lactic acid from fermented jellyfish mucus. Imagine explaining that on a cooking show, today's secret ingredient, snot of the deep. The kitchen itself is a time capsule. Bronze knives hang rust-free, a lost alloy recipe involving shark bile, and the mortar bears grooves from grinding spices that no longer exist, like star anise' angry cousin, according to pollen analysis. A clay oven sits cold, its last fish still skewered, now fossilized into something between dinner and geology. Here's a sensory kicker, touch the countertop. Those stains aren't dirt, they're saffron infused into the wood over millennia, seeping upward like liquid gold. Lysandra's ghost would be thrilled, her Yelp reviews praised the sunshine bread she baked here. One scroll gripes, too much sunshine. Burnt tongue. As you pocket a plum pit, don't notice the graffiti on the pantry door. A crudely etched rat declares, even I won't eat that. Harsh, but fair. The real marvel? This kitchen's layout. Cold storage under the floor, herb gardens in ceiling nets, and a quick escape hatch for dumping failed dishes into passing currents. Neighbors often received surprise calamari deliveries. Modern chefs would kill for this efficiency, though maybe not literally, unlike Lysandra's rival, who allegedly salted a competitor's well. But back to the plums. Why save them? Were they a love token? A prank? Or just Bronze Age procrastination? A scroll found nearby reads, Experiment number 47. Preserve patience. Results, TBD. We've all been there, Lysandra. As you exit, the brine's tang fades, replaced by the musk of wet stone. Ahead lies the final stretch, the VR tour where shadows outlive their casters. But before we digitize the dead, let's linger here, where flavor outlived empires. Close your eyes. Taste the plum's afterglow, feel the brine's bite, hear the drip-drip of time pickling itself. This kitchen isn't just a relic, it's a reminder that survival and seasoning are siblings. And if that doesn't lull you to sleep, imagine Lysandra's ghost, hovering over your shoulder, whispering, "You better finish that." The plum's brine still lingers on your tongue as someone slides a VR headset over your eyes, because of course modern humans would digitize the apocalypse. The screen flickers to life, bathing your room in the cool blue of midnight seawater. You're back in the city, but now its ruins are whole, its streets thrumming with shadowy figures who haven't gotten the memo that they're extinct. They bustle past, translucent as jellyfish, repeating their daily routines like actors in a play no one's watching. A fish swims through a baker's ghostly kneading hands. You're not just observing history, you're haunting it. Let's get tactile. Reach out to touch a passing merchant. Your hand phases through his shoulder, and he shivers, or maybe that's the current. He's carrying a basket of virtual sea urchins, their spines glitching through the woven reeds. The VR manual warned this might happen. Residual energy, the tech bros called it. You call it awkward. Mainstream historians love this tech for reconstructing daily life, but here's the twist, the shadows adapt. A fisherman's ghost pauses mid-cast to stare at your headset, cocking his head like a confused cormorant. The software manual claims this is a rendering error. You're not so sure. You're drawn to the agora, where spectral vendors hawk invisible goods. A shadow child chases a glowing fish only she can see, her laughter translated by the headset into bubbles that pop against your ears. The VR's immersive ambience feature pumps the smell of salt and baking kelp bread into your room. It's almost cozy, until a shadow priest materializes 2 inches from your face, mouthing silent words that make your scalp prickle. Historians still argue whether these figures are holographic puppets or something else. One faction cites code proving their AI algorithms trained on ancient scrolls. Another whispers about stone tape theory. That trauma imprints itself on environments, replaying like a broken record. The quirkiest theory? The VR headset's lithium battery accidentally became a medium. The startup's slogan, "See the past." Now with 30% more existential dread. You're following a shadow scribe now, his form pixelated at the edges. He dips a reed pen into virtual ink and etches a tablet that reads, "Why is there a giant eye floating above the market?" The programmers swear they didn't add this. You glance up. The giant eye is your headset's cursor. Here's a reality check. The VR tour's terms of service include, not responsible for spectral attachment or sudden urge to speak linear A. Users report hearing faint whispers post-session, which the company blames on auditory pareidolia. Tell that to the guy who woke up humming a sea shanty about chamber pots. The shadows grow denser as you drift toward the palace. A guard's ghost marches past, his sandals clipping through a sleeping octopus. The throne room looms ahead, its doors etched with warnings you can't read. Inside, the king's shadow holds court, his crown a glitching mess of triangles. He gestures grandly, toward an empty corner. Or is it empty? Your headset flickers, rendering a faint outline of something bowing. The manual said nothing about multiplayer mode. Suddenly, the water darkens. The shadows freeze mid-stride. Your headset vibrates, a system update that feels suspiciously like the ocean holding its breath. The king turns toward you, or maybe the camera, and mouths 3 words. The software auto-translates, "You are late." Then the screen dies, plunging you into blackness save one floating line of text, Error 404, civilization not found. You rip off the headset. Your room feels too still, the silence too thick. Was that a glitch, or a greeting? The manual, in cheerful Comic Sans, suggests, try rebooting. You opt to lie very still instead. The current slows now, gentling you through the ruins like a leaf in a lazy river. Those shadowy figures? Let them fade, pixel by pixel, into the silt. The VR headset's hum dwindles to a lullaby of static, the kind that tugs at your eyelids like tiny anchors. Breathe in, not brine anymore, but the quiet musk of your own pillow. Breathe out, releasing the phantom taste of pickled plums, the prickle of algae headlights, the weight of Steve the Shrimp's eternal judgment. Around you, the city settles into its long dream. Coral creeps over cracked pottery, eels coil in pearl-studded chamber pots, the last shard of Lyssandra's kitchen knife rusts into a cradle for seahorse eggs. Time here isn't a line anymore, it's a loop, a lullaby, a lazy spiral downward. You've walked markets that haggled in handshakes, touched pipes that defied the sea, and floated through prophecies etched by drunkards. Now let them blur, the details softening like ink in water. The scholars' debates, earthquake or hubris, matter less than the weight of your blankets. The squid-faced tax collector fades, the bioluminescent rave dims, even the VR king's cryptic message unravels into nonsense. Feel the sheets cool against your skin, heavy as ocean depths. Here the fans were, a modern substitute for tides. The city's whispers, real or imagined, bleed into the white noise of a world that's moved on. That's the secret of history, isn't it? It never really dies. It just dozes. So let it. Let the last images dissolve, a dancing algae figure waving goodbye, a plum pit sinking into darkness, a shadow child's laugh muffled by distance. You've swum through centuries tonight. Now let the surface claim you, buoying you upward into softer dreams. The ocean keeps its secrets close, murmuring them only to those willing to drift. And you, dear listener, have drifted enough. Let the dark be kind. Let the quiet swell. Let go. Sweet dreams.